What's up, guys, and welcome to the theScore eSports podcast. I am your host, Colin McNeil. Behind the boards, we got Josh Burry. To my silent Josh Burry. To my left.
Sorry, that's horrible radio. I saluted everybody.
Yes,
Sorry,
everyone who's listening in MP3 format, he just saluted. And we've got Daniel Rosen to my left.
Hi, I can speak.
You can. I'm super excited today, guys. Bit tired, needed my coffee, but I feel like I'm going to get all the exhilaration I need from this podcast because we've got, in just a few seconds coming up, Janko Paunović. You know him as YNK, perhaps. He is an ex-pro player. He is an analyst at large, and most recently, he is, of course, the coach of MIBR. I'm actually, incredibly excited to speak to this gentleman. So that being said, guys, I'm going to shut up and let's bring him on.
Hello, Janko. Can you hear us?
Hey, guys. I got you loud and clear.
Fantastic.
Awesome. How are you doing over there? We were just talking before we went on air that you are home after a very long road trip.
Yeah, it's been, I finally got home. It's ever since our boot camp in Madrid that I've been away. So it's been pretty much 7 weeks that I've been with the team boot camping or playing tournaments. So to be home, even if it's for a little while, certainly feels good.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What do you get up to when you come off such a long stretch on the road? Do you just park yourself on the couch, or do you actually go out, family obligations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I try to combine the two. It depends on how much time I have at home. Usually this time I have around 2 weeks, so there's plenty of time to just, relax a little bit, chill, play some video games, and also see friends and see family and all of that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I mostly it's not as bad this time because I came from Europe. Like usually it's worse when you come from NA or somewhere, then you have to deal with jet lag. So at least now there's no jet lag.
That makes
sense.
sense.
Taking it easy, yeah.
Now, when you say chill and play video games, are we talking about grinding Counter-Strike here, or are we just talking about Mario Party?
I do play Counter-Strike with some friends for fun and all, only if we can get a full stack going. But besides that, I also like playing single-player games like Assassin's Creed or, I don't know, The Witcher, like RPGs. I like playing those. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey just came out, so that's going to help me kill some time for sure.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Speaking of time, I do want to talk about some past times that you've had as an analyst, even as a player. But first, I want to ask you about your latest role as coach of MIBR. I feel like there is an enormous amount of expectations on this roster simply because of how it looks on paper. And even though, again, on paper, your results, there are absolutely nothing to scoff at, still there are a lot of people who seem to be of the opinion that it's somehow underperforming. And I just want to ask from your perspective if that conversation, if that narrative makes any sense at all, and if the expectations are reasonable or not at present time.
I think for myself personally, and I think for the team, we don't really pay attention to, what people or whoever that is, think about like expectations, or we have the highest expectations of ourselves. And I think when you look at this 7-week period for us, like the only series that we lost have been to the number 1 and number 2 team in the world. And still, even with that, we would have liked to have achieved a bit more, especially that last game against Astralis in Istanbul. We really felt like we should have been able to close that one out. So it's a bit of a weird dynamic. Sure, some of those losses have not really been close games, but in the end, a loss is a loss, whether you lose 16-12 or you lose 16-5, and you go into the details of like whether you're winning pistols, losing pistols. I don't think it matters that much. I think for me, that has been I think it was the reality of the team at the moment with how much time we had to practice and figure things out. So I think it's a very good base and a very good foundation that has been laid, and that for the future, like it's definitely the last 20 or 30% or so to really get up there and consistently compete for titles. I think that's what's going to happen. But yeah, I don't think we've necessarily underperformed. When you look at our results, where we've placed and who we lost to in playoffs, I don't think I wouldn't call it an underperformance.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair statement, I think, especially when you just look at the raw facts of your performance of late. There are a lot of armchair analysts out there, and one thing that again we hear from quote unquote people is, "Oh, surely there must be a communication problem because you're working with a mixed language roster." Would you be able to speak to a little bit about the communication on that roster and if there is any issues at all?
Yeah, when it comes to the communication, I made one of the kind of rules when I got into the team that unless the three Brazilians are sitting by themselves in a room, but maybe even then, like you need to be speaking English at all times. Like even when you're explaining to each other in game and you're both dead, you need to write in English or talk in English for a couple of reasons. Number one, so that your teammates can understand you, that maybe they can provide some input or maybe they can just add something to the situation. Also because so that they could be on the same page with you what you're talking about. It happened to you two guys now, but the next time it happens, it can be other players. If they don't know what you're talking about, they might not learn anything from it. And also it's gonna help, I mean, in the long term, for the Brazilians, for their English to get even better. I know myself, when you constantly have to speak it at all times, like your vocabulary gets better, things start being more fluent. You don't need to think so much about the words you're going to say, which makes it faster, which is of course super important for CS. And when we talk about comms in game, I don't think we've experienced any serious issues with it. I certainly wouldn't attribute it to us losing games or anything like that. There are some scenarios where a player is struggling to, like, he's trying to remember the exact word for a spot, so it takes him like an extra second to say it, or sometimes they're a bit too focused on their game, so they even don't communicate something, which I'm not sure how much it is to the fact they would have to do it in English instead of Portuguese, for example, if it would be the other way around. But as I said, I don't think it's anything major really, or anything that's like a serious hindrance to our game.
I'm interested because I think we're seeing sort of a rise of, and this has been a conversation that's been happening for about a year, of these, multinational, multi-language rosters, and the kind of we're starting to see a little bit of a move away from these one country, one nation, one language lineups. And I'm wondering, obviously English is the common language at the moment, but do you feel like, again, obviously in your role as a coach, you only know about MIBR, but do you feel like we're going to start to see more teams move to this? Is that actually the future? Is these multinational rosters all speaking English?
Yeah, I think it depends on. I think it probably is, because there's very few countries or regions that have enough talent to give you a really strong tier 1 team. Obviously Denmark is the outlying one, with Astralis, and then North, and then Optic, and then the Heroic almost as well, right? They have so much talent that they really don't need to pick up international players yet, at the very least, to form a really strong roster. But for some of the other regions, that's not the case. Obviously Brazil being the latest one, but you see more and more international rosters. Probably France is the one that's kind of still reluctant to really bring in international players, that can also be their own language barrier that they have. But yeah, it's probably going to be the future, simply because you want to get better players, and sometimes the best player available is not going to speak your own language. You're going to have to be speaking in English, and that's a decision that every team that goes for it has to make. That was obviously a conscious decision that the team made when they were bringing in Stewie. They were like, okay, we could maybe bring some sort of a Brazilian or Portuguese speaking player, but they're not going to be as good. This guy is, maybe the best one we could get, but is it worth it for us if we need to switch to English? And they made a decision that it is, and I think that they've proven to themselves that they can make it work.
I love the note about the French CS scene, Janko, because I'm a big fan of the French CS scene, but it feels like at this point we've basically tried all the possible combinations. Like we've put the pieces into place in all these different teams, and like it doesn't seem like there are results anymore. So I would love to see some of these guys try out with other rosters, like other regions. Especially my boy Kenny, of course.
I knew you would say that.
I want to see Kenny on it. Come on, like he's done his part for the French CS scene now. He's tried every possible combination, basically, right? Like I don't know. Anyways, I like that you brought up Stewie and his addition to the team, Janko, because some people have criticized Stewie and Tarek as maybe their playstyle having changed a lot since joining MIBR, and typically this criticism is that they're playing a little bit more passively than we've seen them in the past. Do you think that is an accurate observation, and or is this intentional that they play a little bit more passively as part of the current roster dynamic in MIBR?
Yeah, I think obviously all players have their preferences or their tendencies or a certain way they like to play the game, but the team is above any player, and the way that the team wants to play and the way we approach playing the game, there were some adjustments that had to be made to their styles to an extent in some situations, where they would like to just kind of speed up the pace and try to end things as fast as possible. They had to learn a bit more patience and being a bit more composed, but you also want to try to get the most out of the players, right? Like Stewie is really good at working around utility, playing around smokes. Like if you help him out like with some utility, he can really create a lot of space for your team. So you want to try and have some rounds or devise some plays where he's going to be able to kind of fulfill his potential in that sense, where he can really make something happen. And for Tarek, it's a similar scenario. The problem is like there's only so much room in a round to make plays. If you try to do that all over the map, at some side you're gonna run into a wall. So you have to be careful about when do you go for those plays, which side of the map you want to go for them. You cannot just go for Tarek has been a bit bored for 3 rounds, maybe we should give him something to do. Like sometimes you're going to be in a game where you're just going to be holding for 10 out of the 15 rounds because that's what's best for the team, compared to what your opponent is doing. That's the best way for us to beat them. Sometimes you're going to be into more fights, like there's a lot of situational Counter-Strike where the roles are not super set, like this guy is the lurker always, this guy is always the entry fragger. You need to be able to do multiple things on a really high level, because depending on how the round goes, sometimes you're going to have to be the guy supporting from the back because you have the utility. Sometimes you won't have anything and your job is going to be to run in and be the first guy coming in, or be the guy that's going to get the trade or whatever. So I think in that sense, they have adjusted more to the team style of playing the game, and now the next step is kind of seeing, which we're trying to do already, but also seeing how can we add more plays maybe, or more situations where they could have maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure if impact is the right word, but just being able to go for their own thing a bit more often.
So Janko, in a previous interview, I believe with HLTV, you said that before leaving as an analyst, you were offered multiple coaching gigs, including one initially from MIBR. Could you just talk a little bit about what actually enticed you to leave that analyst position and go to MIBR and not any of the other teams that courted you or the first MIBR offer?
Yeah, well, there wasn't like a first or a second offer really for MIBR. It was like a first one that was like a standing offer almost. And when they initially approached me, I was still hesitant to really make the switch. There was also the moving to North America part, which I really wasn't like willing to do. Kinda like my initial plan was to ride out the year as an analyst, and then for next year either make a more structural deal as an analyst, or just move into coaching then. But then some things popped out behind the scenes, like there were some issues really, so I was kind of getting really tired of some of those reoccurring issues, like on the back end of being an analyst. Like I was really fed up with that. It really was killing my motivation, like to do the job. I could feel like my level of like the product, the quality of what I was like doing wasn't like as high as I wanted it to be. So at that point I started thinking a bit more about the whole coaching thing. Would I really want to go into it? Like, and if I did, like, could I do it now? Because there was a deadline on that offer. So after like really putting my thought into it, I decided that, you know, it would be a good change of pace for me. The timing is probably really good as well after the player break to make the switch, giving enough time to some of the tournament organizers that I have agreed to do tournaments beforehand, so they had times to find replacements, and so that I could actually like see how everything will go in terms of coaching. And in regards to the offers, like I had offers before. It's not like a lot of teams approached me at that same period really, but for me probably the only two teams that I would be coaching at the time would be either MIBR or FaZe. And the reason for that is because I know obviously with FaZe there's the NiKo connection, but even with the MIBR guys, I had like a good relationship with them, you know, nothing like super close that we were spending like tons of time at, but at tournaments sometimes you hang out, you talk a little bit. Like they knew my views about the game, they knew a bit how I was as a person, so I knew it would be a good fit. For me, it was important to go into a team where I knew I had the respect of the players, so that I could actually, you know, like get them to do some of the things my way, even if they would be reluctant to do it at first, like to trust me that, you know, this is the way to go. I didn't want to go into a team and they say, hey guys, let's do things this way, and people just say, nah, we're gonna keep doing it our way. For me, that's not like why I would leave the job I had, and, you know, just to be like a decoration behind the players or whatever. I really wanted to have impact because I thought I thought I could bring a lot of value to any team pretty much that I joined, simply because I've watched so much CS over the last 3 years that just see so many situations unfold, and I thought there were a couple of concepts that teams are still not using that could be really strong in the game.
It makes total sense. Could you talk a little bit about, without, you know, necessarily naming people or persons, the issues that you alluded to that sort of pushed you away from the analyst role?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with people. The people are awesome, like, you know, especially like the people from the talent pool. Like, you know, I've had so much great times with those guys, and we still see each other at tournaments. It's mostly things related to the like logistics of the job. It's also the fact that our roles aren't 100% defined. In what I mean by that is, you know, I think I'm an analyst. My job is to come to the tournament, go to rehearsal if you have a rehearsal day, and then the game starts. I do the pre-show. I help create the narrative of the tournament, of the storylines. Game happens, post-game, break it down, and that's it. That's my job. But, you know, then people come to you and say, hey, like, I get an email a week, 10 days before the event while I'm at another event. Hey, we need you to like give us some like clips for this game and that game and this game, and like we're going to be sending you like, I don't know, a sheet to fill out with this or with that, which is like, people, there's a difference between being an analyst and co-producing the show. And for me, it's not the problem of like doing extra work, but if you want me to do extra work in that sense, if you want deliverables, if you want whatever it is, then like that's something that needs to be compensated separately. It is not included in my day rate. Like when people say, yeah, but we're paying you already. Well, what does that mean? Because you're paying me a day rate, at the last day I have to break down the stage, like, So for me, that was just, it was getting ridiculous at some point. And it was getting ridiculous, especially because there were a lot of these requests coming in for, different like products or whatever, like it's from the same organizer. But then when you would try to get something for yourself, whether it's better flight, whether it's like a day earlier at the location, right, because you're coming in from straight from a tournament, you're not coming from home, so that you don't spend a day like doing nothing, so you can go there, like deal with jet lag a bit more. Every time it was like a fight, and it was a struggle. So by the end of it, like I really felt kind of underappreciated, like for what we were doing and for all the loyalty I've given like to that company. So for me, it was just, I just had like a sour taste in my mouth. I really didn't want to kind of keep on working with them. So I realized, okay, so if I don't want to do this, then probably I would have to like move into something else, because otherwise this is not really sustainable. And then I decided, okay, the coaching gig is like there. That's something I wanted to do, and now is as good of a time as any to start going for it. So basically that was what it was around. Like talent has a lot of things behind the scenes that they struggle with, that people don't really see, because people are professionals at the end of the day. They go out and they do their job, but there are things that are super frustrating that people have to deal with from one tournament to another. And I'm not sure when it's going to really get better in that regard.
Well, that's actually a great point, I think, because in a way, it's like you have a bunch of different bosses. Like you have a bunch of different employers, right? And they have different expectations. And like you said, at a certain point, they have this expectation that's unrealistic. And honestly, congrats to you for sort of drawing that line and being like, this is what you're paying me to do. I'm not being paid to wash the windows at the venue. Like you paid me to do specific things, and I'm gonna do those things. So yeah, I honestly, big respect for me for that, because it's I think it's easy, especially today, for people to just try and ask for extra stuff and then see if you do it, because maybe some other people did it.
That's just it.
Yeah.
So, it is the problem. Some other people end up doing it. I mean, and that kind of defeats the purpose of you trying to make it better for everyone by trying to make a stand. I mean, I don't want to put it out like, I was trying to, I don't know, take a hit for like everyone else or anything. No, it wasn't like that. It was just for me personally. It wasn't something that I was okay with. There are, like, for example, when you go and do ELEAGUE, like there's a good amount of work involved there. There's a production meeting every morning before the show. But with ELEAGUE is like they treat you really well. The people there are professional. Like when you come to that meeting, you're not just sitting there, twiddling your thumbs. You're actually, there's a reason why people are there and what you're doing there, and they come with something that's super prepared, and then you just say if you think some adjustments need to be made. Like they put you up in a great hotel, they give you great flights, you have food throughout the day, options for food, and you're compensated well for your work. Like that's all there needs to be to it. There's no crazy things like first class flights or business class flights or some mad hotels, or I want like an assistant following me at all times. No, it's mostly the basic stuff. If I'm going through from one continent to the other to a third for 3 of your tournaments, like you probably shouldn't be giving me like a huge problem about like picking a flight if the difference is like a couple of $100 or something. Like if it's in your interest for us who are going to be the face of the broadcast, like to be able to deliver a good product. But I guess that's the difference between some tournament organizers at the moment. Like there are a few that are trying and like focusing more on quality and trying to like improve things in different aspects. But with some other ones, like there are a lot of issues that you run into.
That's completely fair, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say it's unfortunate that you felt undervalued, because I remember saying to these guys that you were on, it felt like every desk at one point, and I think you brought a great deal to those desks, a great deal of historically pointed, very sober, very interesting analysis. And that was lost, so that's unfortunate. Dan, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I was gonna ask, because you've mentioned obviously before that some stuff with the job was a little difficult, and now you've moved to this kind of very different role where the schedule is very different and the work is very different. And I want to ask how kind of the lifestyle, like your lifestyle and mentality, has changed as a result of this shift, right? You're still in the same space. It's still Counter-Strike. You're still doing similar things.
Still traveling, obviously.
Still traveling, but how have things changed for you?
Yeah, well, the schedule is a bit different. I traveled probably even more than I would have if I were an analyst, because we've been like to 2 boot camps, and then besides that tournaments and Zotac as well. But I think it's a different dynamic in a sense where like you kind of have more free time in a day, but in reality, like with the team, you have to set a time. If you play a late game, like when is the time everyone needs to be awake, like we maybe go for lunch together, then we go to the prac room so that the players can warm up, so that we can talk about the upcoming games, like talk about which maps we think we're going to play, do a scrim or two to just get through some situations we think are going to happen in a game. So for me, because of how much work there was with the team, and just in general, I was just working a lot on trying to help the team in any way I can in terms of like preparation, whether it's our own game or scouting the opponents. So in these last 7 weeks that we've been on the road, it's been a lot of it has been just you wake up, CS, and then the whole day passes, and then you go to sleep, and then it's the same thing again. Obviously, in the long term, things should get a bit more easier, because now we've done a good amount of work already together. We got to know each other better. When we are in LA, we'll be able to have design the days how we see fit and put some good work there, so that for the next tournaments in November or whenever, it doesn't have to be 8 hours a day, just even on a match day, to still need to go over some things because we didn't have time to go over them in the boot camp. So I think it should be a bit more lax. In sense of travel, I'm probably gonna travel less, but spend more time away from home, simply because the base of the team is in Los Angeles. So as an analyst, like after tournaments, even if it was for 2-3 days in between tournaments, I would go home. But here, even when there's no tournaments, I'll be with the team, because there will be practice. There's always something that you need to work on.
I actually I appreciate that you mentioned the long term, and I want to ask, in an earlier interview, you indicated that you'd be with the team until the end of September and then reevaluate. Want to know if there's anything you could tell us about your current situation. Are you going to be sticking with MIBR for now? Like, is there any sort of agreement in place? Like, what is your immediate plan for continuing coaching?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult at the moment because of the time zone difference. Like I'm 9 hours ahead of everyone over there. But basically, the plan is just, I think we did a lot of good work in the past 2 months. I really enjoyed working with the players, like even through the ups and downs. It's been a lot of fun for me. And I think, as I said before, I think we got the foundations in place, but now it's about building the real important stuff and doing things that I think would enable us to really start our way getting back to the top, being the best team in the world. And that's going to require some commitments maybe from the players, or for some things to agreeing to do them a little bit differently. So right now it's basically I'm just waiting to like hear back from them. I don't think that for me, like the way it is, like it's nothing like major or massive for me. I feel like it's more or less just a formality for people to. It's something that I had to tell them, and something that I had to kind of, explain that a few of the things need to change. But it's nothing that I think it's going to cause any problems with me staying with the team. So as soon as that happens, I'm going to start negotiating my contract with the organization. And then the plan is for me to sign a contract until the end of the next major in Katowice, because that would give us more than enough time to really like be super prepared with the team. Of course, we would have a good number of really high profile tournaments up until that point. So we would get a lot of like reference points for our results and for our work. And probably most importantly for me personally, as I would get to go to LA a few times, and we would practice from the office and I would stay there. So then I could really see how that dynamic works, because after that I would have to commit and really move to LA, and I would just spend more time there. So at that point I would have to make the switch. For now, like even if I sign the contract, it's going to be like going to LA for 10 days, then there's 2 tournaments, then you go back for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then again it's a couple of tournaments, and then it's the player break. So it's not the same as in, okay, there's a full month where we are just in LA, and maybe there's a tournament in North America at most, and that would be it, which for me would be a whole different beast. So yeah, that's pretty much where things are at right now. My expectations are for things like to go pretty smoothly, and just in the next week or two have a new contract signed until the end of the Katowice major.
I just want to backtrack a few minutes, Janko, when we were talking about your initial signing on with MIBR, and you mentioned FaZe. There was an offer from FaZe. I wonder if you could speak to why you might have declined that offer with that just incredible roster. Surely it must have been, it must be a dream for many coaches to get that as an offer.
Yeah, well, the FaZe offer was a bit, weird. It was like me talking to NiKo basically at the time, like casually, and he was telling me even before, like that, he would like me to be in his team and everything. And I think the notion of that was that, Robin, he just like had now like during the major he got another kid. Like at the time he had a child on the way, a second one. So the notion was, Robin in the future would like to spend more time at home and move to a different position maybe within the FaZe organization, and at that point we would like need a coach. And the way I understood it at the time was like that Robin is just waiting for kind of like a proper replacement, and then he wanted to step down as soon as possible. But then when I decided to kind of go into coaching and was talking to teams, then I realized it was more like, well, he would like to keep doing it for a little while at the very least, maybe until the end of this year. And so for me, that was immediately like out of the question. I never intended to like steal someone's job or go for a position which is already filled, right? For me, I was just under the impression that it was a matter of, yeah, if you want to, like, he's just waiting for someone to come along and step down. But as soon as I saw that wasn't the case, that wasn't really an option for me anymore. And at the end of the day, like, I also just liked more the MIBR roster, even if coaching FaZe would mean I could stay in Europe, basically do it from home.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. A lot of our conversation is sort of almost accidentally dancing around the topic of how busy schedules are in Counter-Strike. Whether you are an analyst, a coach, a player, a caster, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the potential oversaturation of events. I mean, just after the last major, days after it ended, we had another major event in New York, and then we had another major one in Istanbul going on at the exact same time. It seems a bit much.
Yeah, I think it's borderline stupid at this point, and not necessarily events, more so the online leagues. And it's a conversation that's been like had many times, and I think what you're going to see in the near future, probably from the start of next year, is you're going to see some of the tier 1 teams start playing only one league and start skipping more tournaments, because it's just unsustainable. Like the whole major and then blast in New York thing, I can't really blame that all too much, because it's hard for these TOs. They have to book an arena like in advance for it to not be ridiculously expensive, and also for it to just be available. And then Valve shows up and they give you a 9 months notice and they put a major somewhere in the calendar. So for tournament organizers that are around it, I mean, they're kind of already committed at that point, and it is what it is. But I think you can see how many teams pulled out of Star Ladder. You can see that Astralis even decided to pull out of Epicenter, which is an 8-team tournament only. So I think that's going to be a recurring theme in the next couple of months, in the next year, that teams are going to start picking their tournaments more, because this is just unsustainable. Like, I'm a very demanding guy when it comes to the team and everything, and the quality of practice, but we've just been on the road for 7 weeks and the players are now back. They had to play the ECS qualifier thing, and there's a ton of pro league matches as well for them. Like, people are, it's not even like jet lag, it's just like you're just so drained from so much travel. Like, you've been just doing CS for 7 weeks. If I could, I would give my players a week off. I would tell them, there's not going to be practice, you just need to play CS like 2 hours a day just to kind of stay in shape, quote unquote, and that would be it. But right now, that's impossible to do in the CS circuit, because there's always something, and there's a lot of good teams out there. You can't even think about we'll just play the official game, like, and we're still going to be able to win. Like, there's even in the North American region, there's a lot of new teams that can upset. We saw Complexity at the major, we saw Ghost Gaming at Masters, and just in general lately, like, they've been playing better, like Energy, Liquid, us, Cloud9. You add Luminosity there. Like, there's already a lot of teams where you look and you're thinking, yeah, like Rogue. There's a lot of teams that are there's very little walkover teams now, even in North American region. So it's very hard to come and say to the players, hey, like, we need to practice again for 2 hours before these 2 EPL games. So I'm really kind of hoping that, but there's nothing to hope for, really. It's going to be down to the teams. I really believe teams are going to start skipping more tournaments, because that way you feel more motivated. You can actually put quality practice and do quality preparation coming into a real big tournament. And sure, it sucks maybe to skip an Epicenter. It would suck maybe in the future to miss an ESL 1 or a Masters or a Blast, whatever it is, But when you look at the big picture of the team, I think it's going to be important to basically just remain competitive.
No, for sure. And again, like you said, it's about giving people space to breathe, right? You're not going to play your best CS if you are nonstop playing CS, right? You're just not going to have that palate cleanser, that time to like really digest the last game and think, well, what went wrong there? Like, you're just not going to have that time. Speaking of that, though, I want to talk a little bit go back to the coaching side of things for a second. And you've previously talked about creating a certain culture and building that culture within MIBR. And I guess I was wondering what that culture is, what approach you're taking to kind of molding these players.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of it is about effort and just giving your best. I really believe like that this team has enough talent to be the best team in the world. So if you truly believe that, and if that is the case, then the only thing that's stopping you from reaching that potential is yourself. So for me, it was about getting the team to work hard, to work with a purpose, not to just play scrims. It's okay. Today we're playing how many maps? Which maps are they going to be? What do we need to improve on these maps? What are the issues? Like, let's try to tackle those. Let's talk about what are the potential solutions for the issues we have, so that we go into every map with an intent and purpose, and then after each practice we can look at the games and see and learn something out of it, right? Like, whether you win or lose, there's always something that you can take out of a game, and I think that way you're going to be improving the fastest and progressing at a much faster rate. So for me, it was about that. It was about the players kind of, I think there's a lot of things with the players in the teams, not doing things like kind of I'm not sure if it's the right way is the way to say it, but I've been to so many, whether it's after parties or just nights at the hotel and a team is out of it, and I talk to a player casually and he starts bad-mouthing his teammates and like, oh, this guy is like so bad, like, or like that's mistake, or if I could only change this guy. It's like, well, when you're thinking like that already, like the team is probably not going to work in the long term. And I just explained kind of to the players that we are a team. We win and lose as a team. You're there to have your teammates' backs. Like, you guys need to play for each other. You need to believe, like, at any point in the game, like, until the game is over, like, you need to be playing like the game is winnable. I really believe that a big problem is sometimes teams lose a silly round and then it gets into their head and they lose 4 more rounds because of that one round, right? And that's a much bigger problem. In CS, you can turn anything around. Like, for me, it's ridiculous that you're up 6-0 and then you lose a 3v1, and instead of just resetting them, and in the grand scheme of things, it's even better for you. People are not focused on the next round. They're still thinking about the dumb round that they lost, but then they lose the reset round, and then you have to eco, and now you're actually losing control of the game. Like, if you lost one round, you haven't lost the control of the game. So for me, it's mostly been focused on that we work hard, that we prepare well, that we do our best, and if that's the case, like, we won't have anything to regret after the game, whether we win or lose, if we've done everything that we could. The problem is sometimes if you lose a game and the atmosphere wasn't good because of whatever happened within the game, and then you see that you've lost and you kind of haven't given it 100% even, and that feeling is just horrible. Like, everyone knows it after the game is over. So I really wanted to avoid having that in the team and having the players basically have fun playing, and that we were always doing things in a way that we feel it's best, and that we were all on the same page. And then after that, whatever happens. I always tell the players, like, guys, I don't care about results. I'm convinced that if we work the right way and if we work hard, results will eventually come. Like, there's no way they cannot come, but for that, work comes first.
Fair enough. Janko, I got a bit of a curveball for you now. We're getting along in the podcast a little bit. Lately, one thing we've been doing with our guests is telling stories, getting them to tell us a story. And actually, the the last time we did this, we had Jordan on, we had nothing on, and he told us some stories about the Cloud9 days, and we made like a little animation about it. And as you were speaking, I was sort of thinking of your career in my head, and you mentioned NiKo. The NiKo connection was sort of how you started talking to FaZe and potentially replacing Robin. You guys used to play together back in the day on iNation, I believe. Do you have any stories, nothing that'll get the young man arrested or anything, but any stories about a young NiKo, the young prodigy coming up, the Bosnian prodigy?
About NiKo, I mean, what can you say about him? I remember when he was a kid, when we were still playing, when 1.6 was still the game being played, and I was like, I don't know, let's say an up and coming player, like second or third best team in the country, and there was this kid coming in with his parents, like finally, from Bosnia, started playing with some guys from a city up north in Serbia. He comes to the tournament, they have to come with him, and he has to bring all these books to put on the chair because he can't actually even sit properly behind the desk and play the game. And I remember, like, in the beginning, like his passion was like so insane. I think I deleted him from Steam like 15 times back then and everything, because every day, all the time, he would just be mix, like 5v5, 5v5, 5v5. It's just like so annoying. It was like, please just stop messaging me. But eventually, he got to play with those guys, and he started playing with some guys from Belgrade. Then eventually Kasad got him into iNation, even in 1.6, and that's where really, like, legitimately, people are like, yeah, like, this kid is actually like super sick, and he's been just working really hard, and he matured a lot as a player. So it's great to see him compete, kind of be one of the world's best players. So remember him when he like had to put things on the chair so he could actually even reach the PC. That was kind of hilarious. But yeah, most of the stories you want to hear about, like, you get them from his Instagram anyway. So yeah.
That's fair. That's totally fair. He must have been, I don't have it in front of me now, but he must have been incredibly young at the time, especially like you said, if he's the guy sitting on books. Did you guys, I don't know what the culture could have possibly been like on iNation. Did you guys ever go out for a drink after the game and like he couldn't, like, what, he couldn't come, I guess? Like, how did that work?
Oh, in this part of the world, that doesn't exist. Like, he couldn't come or anything like that. That was always fine. But I mean, when we started playing in iNation CS:GO, he was by the time 17, kinda. Like, so in these parts, like, that's people already have had like at least beers or something before and things like that. So we've definitely had, when we were in tournaments, when we went to our first international tournament in Vienna, like, albeit back then we were dirt poor, but we would have like, we would walk around, have some drinks, like, enjoy and everything. So we've had, and then later on when I started working and he started playing for Mouse Sports, and then later on for FaZe, we did have times when we would go out and party and have some fun. But yeah, even not in the days when it was 1.6, he couldn't really do it in front of his parents. He was way too young back then. But later on, when we started playing CS:GO and everything, yeah, for sure. Here, like, the culture is, that's why also I like had a good connection with the MIBR guys. Like, our culture is similar to the Brazilian one, in the sense of, like, people are super friendly, they're laid back, even when sometimes they shouldn't be as laid back. They're very passionate, emotional. Like, we used to argue on the team, and then we would have good times and so on. There's a lot of highs and lows. It's not like, for example, I don't know, the Scandinavian region, right? People are all pretty, like, mellow, I guess. Like, they don't get too excited about stuff, or they don't get too frustrated. They just kind of play. We're a bit different. So it's been a lot of situations like that over the years.
You and like, just again on you and NiKo, I mean, you would have been older than him, I suppose, and possibly, I don't know if you were in a mentor role, but you were at least more experienced than the kid. Did you guys ever argue, and what was that dynamic like? Were you sort of like the father figure, or was it just screaming?
Yeah, I think more of a mentor to him than me was Kassad, because there was a time that I kind of stopped playing towards the end of 1.6 when they were really starting to get really good and go to some international tournaments. So I think Kassad helped him a lot in that sense of kind of helping him mature a bit as a player. When it comes to me and NiKo, sure, like we had the conversations, we had our arguments too. I remember when we were supposed to start playing in CS:GO together, there was something about like Assad told me, "Hey, just message him like on Facebook with this or something. He's not answering my phone." Or like NiKo told me, "Yeah, like add me on Facebook or something," and I typed his name and nothing popped up. I was like, "What's going on here?" And then I checked, and I remember like I blocked him on Facebook like a way back because he was like annoying about something. So I just like blocked him on everything. But we've definitely had like our heated arguments and yelling. But it wasn't that much, to be honest. Like on the team, it was that happened more. Like me and Kassad had that with between ourselves a few times, more so with some of the other players. But NiKo, he was just always so talented, and like he was doing his job within the game. He wasn't being like toxic. It wasn't like that. He was just playing, and he was playing really well. So there was very few things that you would kind of get into. You know, there were very few ways for you to get into an argument with him because he was just doing everything really well. And even if you were maybe not doing things 100%, he wouldn't be the guy who was like going to start yelling at you or anything like that.
That's really funny, actually. That's a good point. Now that I think about it, you're not going to be in the situation where you're going, NiKo, you got to trade those or something
Yeah.
like that. He just does it, right?
Yeah.
It's also.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
there was one thing with NiKo that was an issue back then. It was he would try to do too much, like he would get 2 kills, and then instead of like falling back and we just play the round, like he would try to go for more, and then he would die, and then the round would become harder than it's supposed to be. That just tells you, like, for a team of guys from this region that's never been big in CS, and that we've had to like learn so much about the game when we started playing, for that to be the kind of only thing that he wasn't doing like 100% right, just tells you how talented like he is and how ahead of us he was even back then when it came to the game and the mechanics of the game.
It's also funny for me to hear you describe, you guys are passionate and arguing because you, Janko, just as a viewer on the outside and also speaking to you now on this podcast, you have always come across, at least to me, as a very boots on the ground, sober, reasonable human being. Like, it's almost hard for me to imagine you getting so impassioned that you start yelling at people.
Yeah, it's true, but it all changes when you start competing, right? Like when I'm an analyst, what do I need to get heated about? There's, just like, or frustrated about something while I'm working. But, when you're playing, when you're competing, like I'm a super competitive person. Like I hate losing more than I like winning. So it's just like when you see people not doing their best, or someone repeating their mistakes, or someone not taking things as seriously as they should. Even when I was playing, I just felt like, well, you're wasting my time now. Like, if we're all here, like committed, you're not doing anything else. Like, why can't you give 100%? And then that's where the frustration comes in, and that's where you start having clashes with people where you feel like someone is not working as hard as they should be, and that's causing us to like lose or stagnate or whatever, and we're putting a lot of time, a lot of hours into this game.
Yeah,
That's why people were, I guess, so surprised when they were like seeing, like they were watching the games and seeing me get hide behind the team. Like, I don't know what people expected for me to just stand there like poker face all the time and like, yeah.
That's true. That's true. A lot of the stills and the video images that come from you standing behind the team, you have a look of like, I'm sure it's not like rage on your face. You're in the game, right? Whereas I think some people would stand behind the team and look almost statuesque and maybe purposely give off that incredibly cold, calm, rock-like vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's because it kind of blew up in the NIP game at the major, but it's just because you feel so powerless when you stand behind the team. Like, you can't you can only talk in timeouts and everything, and you just want to help in any way you can. So at that point, I felt like I said everything I had to say in the timeouts. I gave them all the guidance I can. Not the players are the ones who play at the end of the day. The coaches do their work mostly before the game starts. When it starts, it's mostly down to the players. So I just felt like, because the game was super stressful, or it's a high pressure game. Like, we were playing really well, but we were losing all these pistols. And all of that stuff. So I just felt like maybe if I start being loud behind the team and everything, is going to get their energy up a little bit as well. And I know when the energy is up, when people are communicating well, that's when we play our best CS. So it kind of came from all of that. And obviously I'm also, I feel like I'm competing as well, and I'm invested in the results and what's going on. So that's why you see these situations unfold, you see the round developing, and then you're just like either so stressed or so relieved based off of what's actually happening in the game.
Of course. How can you not be? I think one other thing that just came to mind for me was that as we were sort of talking about NiKo's early days, just recently it was confirmed that he's going to be, at least for the moment, IGLing in FaZe. And as a guy who spent whose living was analyzing teams, as a guy who knows NiKo from way back, I'd really love to get your take on this move.
Yeah, I think for how do I put this, I think it's to an extent maybe a recurring theme with Kerrigan, but I don't want to sound too harsh here. Like, I think he's a very smart guy. I think he's a great in-game leader for sure. Like, when you look what he's achieved with the teams like he's captained, I think the problem is, it seems like at some point, like, he just loses the trust of his players. Like, the team loses the confidence in him as a captain or as an in-game leader. And when that happens in your team, like, that guy cannot be the in-game leader. Like, it's very hard to turn that around. You just need to have so many like good games and do things the right way for you to turn that around in the players' head. So I think that's the main reason. I really believe that if NiKo didn't take over the leading at the major, that FaZe wouldn't make the playoffs. And I'm not saying this because I think NiKo was making amazing calls or that Kerrigan calls were terrible. I think it's because it just turned, like, it really changed the atmosphere within the team. Everyone became like a bit more, more high. They felt like, yeah, this is the change that we need. You need something at that point. You're 0-2 down, and a lot of players are probably thinking about Krakow again and all of that. So I think for FaZe, it was kind of unnecessary change, even though it's probably not ideal when you look at the team. When it comes to NiKo as an in-game leader, I think he, obviously knows a lot about the game, has very good game sense, but to be a full-time in-game leader is like a completely different beast, like, for example, even on our team, like, Fallen is the in-game leader, and sometimes, like, I mean, almost everyone, but Cold or Stewie come up with like a great call or a great idea, and sometimes even during the game, like, and that's great, like, players can do that, but for you to be able to call the whole game and like keep everything in mind, like about what you've been doing, what the opponents have been doing, what's their money situation at, right? It's much easier to call 2 or 3 rounds a game when you feel like it, when you see something, compared to you knowing that at the beginning of every round you're the guy who's going to have to make a call, like you're directing your teammates, right? So that's why I think being a full-time in-game leader, that's why for me the in-game leader is the most important player on the team. Now, I haven't played with NiKo for a while to really know, like, even, I talked to him and all of that, but I don't know if he is prepared to be that guy. I personally don't think he should be that guy because, he's just such an amazing player. You want him to be in a position where, he's just killing people and that's his main focus, and he's winning you rounds that maybe sometimes you should even lose, and have some other guy who is not that good maybe at killing people be the guy who's going to think about everything and direct people a bit more. But we'll see what happens to FaZe and their roster. Like if this is just going, if Carrigan is just going to be a player moving forward, and NiKo as the in-game leader, I think the problem when he was doing it in mouse sports, he was not mature enough, basically, and probably not good enough to be able to pull that off at the time. Now, obviously, it's been 2 years since that time. He's matured more as a person and as a player. So I'm interested to see how it goes, because he's a very competitive guy, and sometimes you need to learn how to manage people and realize that people sometimes you will just make mistakes, not with an intention to like make it. Like sometimes shit just happens, and as an in-game leader, you're the one who sets the tone. So if you start arguing and you start like pointing that out too much within a game, it's going to bring the whole team down. So I'm excited to see how it goes. Like I can't really give you an answer if I feel that it's going to be great or if it's going to go horrible. I think that you're probably looking at the team and you're wondering, well, if NiKo's going to be the in-game leader, what's the point of Carrigan in that lineup? And then you wonder, like, if a change happens, then things might move around even more, and so on. But yeah, I think he can do the role. I don't think he should be doing the role. I'm not sure if he can do it consistently on like a level where you're competing against Astralis, like Navi, us, Liquid, all these teams, and there's so many mind games involved that I've only realized once I've joined the team and started working as a coach. Like there's so much that you need to think about. Like sometimes I don't know how Fallen even does it, but yeah, it's a super demanding role.
To cap off the FaZe discussion a little bit, Janko, I wanted to ask, it was a possibility. Now we sort of heard the background about it, but it was a possibility that you could have walked into FaZe at some point as the coach and had to figure out where this team is going to go, like what's going to happen with it. And my question to you is there anything that you can point to right now in terms of what FaZe should be doing with this roster? Because I think for me, this has been extremely disappointing to watch them sort of constantly flounder. They've gotten so close. I'm a big Guardian fan, obviously a big NiKo fan. Like, what is it that this team is missing? Is it really just the IGL thing, or is there more? Like, I remember when it formed, we were talking to Semler, and Semler said, "Where's the support on this team?" Like, because they got rid of Keo, right? We were like, "What's happening? Where is it?" So, do you have any ideas on what maybe they could do?
Yeah, I think at this point, FaZe needs to make a roster change, and I'm not saying that because I don't think the players on this team, like these 5 players, are good enough to be the best. I think they are, but the problem is, they've obviously had like a loss of confidence, like in the in-game leader and also in general, right? And even though people can say from the outside on paper, I don't think they should change anything. They have like the players to do it. Well, they do, but if the players don't function as a unit, they don't function as a team, then that's all like irrelevant, really, at least in my mind. So because of that, unless the players can somehow, talk it out or whatever, and figure it out between themselves, I think a roster change is needed to kind of get everyone off to a fresh start and figure out, is the next player going to come in and be the in-game leader, or is he going to come in and just play and NiKo will be the in-game leader? Whatever it is, like you need some sort of a jump start really to get the team going again. Like I think like probably MIBR felt in a similar way. That's why they, after 2 years, was it, like really wanted to get like a proper coach, because if you don't have one at all, like they didn't, that's also a good way. Like you bring someone new and you kind of set some rules, and it gets everyone to be on the same page again.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Absolutely. Now, Janko, we at theScore eSports do a lot of historically pointed content. And you, of course, have a lot of historical knowledge. So I feel like this is a perfect opportunity to ask you some questions about the past. And one project that we're working on about the past at this present time is Virtus.pro something I want to call Virtus.pro the golden years. That is probably not what it's going to be called, but we've seen the I don't want to sound too harsh here. We've seen the death of the old Virtus.pro, right? That's just a fact, both in results and in the literal core of the team. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I wonder if you could give us some insight into, in your view, what made Virtus.pro, when they were on top of the Counter-Strike world, what made them special? What was their magic? Because I feel like every truly great team and every truly great player has a little magic that is unique to them, that is like a signature or a calling card that no one else can replicate to their level.
Yeah, I think when you look at Virtus.pro, it was a combination of things. Main one for me was how they played as a team. They had like really strong team play. Like people would always talk about the plow and their T side. Well, that comes from them being a very well-oiled machine. People being aware of what their responsibilities are within the round. I would always point it out on a map like Train, which was one of their great maps. Like, if you're a great team on any map, you're a great team because you can win a lot of rounds on the harder side, no matter what, right? And VP was one of those teams who could make it easy, like winning 8, 9, 10 rounds on T side of Train. And their game was never about, Snacks runs out and gets 3 kills, or Bialy or Pasha with the op. They would always like rely on taking control of the map, like working things out, figuring out what the setup is of the opponents, and then always having, like, whether it's an execute or just a simple ending to a round after a default, they will always have something like that in place to finish off the round. And that's very hard to deal with when you're CT. When people are just you just play passive and then T's have all control. Like, if it's a really good team, and they will figure out like what your setup is, and they will do something like to counter it. And then VP at the time was just really good at that style. And then of course they had a more like brute force way of playing, like more aggressive, like whether it was executes to change the pace, which was also really good. You couldn't always count on them, for example, playing slow like you could at times versus Navi or anything along those lines. And I think, like with any team, whenever any team was like dominant in a certain period, like their individuals were also playing really well. Like that was when Snacks became known for his plays around the smoke. Nowadays it's pretty common. You see people like smokes fly over and a guy's just sitting in a smoke, like not caring about anything else, and then teammates pop flash comes in and all of a sudden he's playing. Like back then that was super rare, and Snacks was one of the first guys who have started doing it. It was so frustrating to play against, like you come up with all of this and then a guy showing up through a smoke just wrecks you completely. So the time where, the first half of 2014, like Pasha was the best player in the world pretty much. And Pasha has always been that guy who has a sort of a quirky style. Like sometimes things he does are they don't make as much sense, or they're maybe not the best play, but he has a way of figuring out when it's going to be unexpected and when people are going to get caught off guard by it. So they had a very good mix of just strong team play, individuals playing well, and just the team, having a lot of confidence. Like, I know people get tired of hearing that word and when it comes to talking about teams, but it does indeed play like a big factor when it comes to tier 1 CS. That's what I said to my team. I said, when I talked to Fallen, for example, I was saying, like, you're the same player that was the second best player in the world 2 years ago, top 10 last year. Like, you did not forget how to play the game. Other people did not learn how to play the op better than you did. Like, it's because of the fact that the team wasn't in the right place. There were internal issues within the team that were affecting everyone's motivation and everyone's work. And, that's why performance have dropped. And I think, just you look at how he's played mostly in these like last 2 months or everything, you could have clearly seen at times like flashes of, or full maps or full runs of tournaments where he was playing like super well. So for players and for teams, when it comes to the highest level of competition, like that is a massive factor.
I love the way you started that answer with the analogy with the plow. I don't know if this is just me, if I'm just a little dense here, but when you say Polish plow, I never thought of it as like it's a machine and therefore all the parts of the machine have to work. I just thought that was great. That's I've never thought of it like that. But Dan, I think you had a question that's a little more grounded in today.
Obviously we're going a little long. This is the last thing I asked before Colin starts to wind us down. This is a similar question, but obviously right now I think kind of the general agreed upon thing is Astralis is the best. And you guys just played them. It was, I want to know, what is it about Astralis that makes them what they are? What is it? What are you looking to beat, basically? What are you looking at them and seeing in them that you're like, well, this is what we have to do to stop them?
I think Astralis are playing the best Counter-Strike that has been played ever since CSGO came out. They play in a way where they are playing kind of the percentages. They're giving themselves the most chances to win the game. They're not playing to win every single round. They know when to, cover their losses and fall back and play the next round. That's why you see Astralis almost never loses a game, 16-5, 16-7, right? Like it's always double digits. It's always close. And they play in a way that's really smart way to play, where they take calculated risks. They pick their fights. They're very dynamic, very proactive team. They're not going to sit back and let you do whatever you want. They're going to try and figure out where your weak spot on the map is, and they're going to try to take that from you. When you're trying to take one area of the map, they're going to try to take something else back from you, so you can never have a situation where you feel like you have full control, right? They're always going to try and deny you that. So that's why against Astralis, like it's very difficult to play. You have to be on your A game throughout the game. There's going to be a lot of rounds where you're going to win the round easy, but they're going to end up saving. So the next round is going to be more difficult than maybe it would be against some of the other teams. Obviously, their utility usage comes from the calculated risk-taking part as well. Late in the round, when they have a full gun round and you're playing ST, there's always going to be a guy that's going to have like a smoke and a molly left somehow or something like that really messes up with people. When you go in somewhere with 25 seconds left and a smoke comes down, that you were like, how is there a smoke after all this time? Like it completely messes up with your timing, with what you wanted to do. Maybe you have to adjust on the fly. When you have to adjust that late, it's never going to be like super well coordinated. It's never going to be as strong as what you wanted to do at first. So I think with Astralis, the main thing that sets them apart is the team play. And then, of course, on top of that, again, like what I said just now, is they have guys playing super, super well individually. Like you have Device, who I've always praised when I was on the desk as an opper for how mobile he is. That's what makes it hard playing against them. I knew that before coming into the team. It's the same when you play them against some teams. You know where the opera is going to be. He maybe has 2 or 3 spots he likes to play it. Device, like you can never know really for sure, like 100% where he's going to be, and that makes it harder to game plan, makes it harder to develop around. You have, you can pick out any player on that team who has been performing great. Like for me, it's probably Glaive, who has impressed me the most, simply because he's also the in-game leader. Like, how difficult that is in itself and how much he has to do in general, and to also like have so many smart plays, like just in terms of positioning, like gaining information and all of that. Like it's been really impressive to see. But just like any other team, like they're the dominant team right now, but they're not unbeatable. And I think it's good because they've set the bar really high for everyone else, and every other team needs to step up to be able to compete with them.
I'm really happy that you said that they're playing like the best Counter-Strike since CS:GO started. That's quite a statement there, and I think they're just so thrilling to watch. Like I don't know how this room feels. I don't care what anybody says, but like I find them thrilling. Like when they do stuff that like Janko was just talking about, like when they do something like they lose one guy and they lose control of a site, and they'll just run. They'll just full save. They won't try to retake. Like, they do things like that. And it's maybe not that like you've literally never seen it before, but it's so refreshing in a ecosystem where like 99 out of 100 teams are just like, okay, we're gonna go for it. Like, what's an economy? We're just gonna go retake the site.
It's very disciplined, you know, like if you're 5-0 up or whatever, and like they take control, like you're 3v4 and they have control of B, for example, like for you to win the game, it's much better to just play for exits and they win a round and they have one guy alive and you have two guys left alive. Well, it's a reset round for them. I mean, for both teams, but presumably you have more money in the bank. So you're going to have another good buy, especially if you've saved two guns. So then you can have an op, everyone can have everything. Like, you don't need to have UMPs. But the T is if they have one guy alive, like he can drop, then the three other guys need to like buy for themselves. Their money is not going to be great. So they either buy AKs and a lot of utility, or someone has to buy a UMP and all of utility or anything like that. Meaning like they come into the round with a non-optimal buy. Like you have the upper hand at freeze time in that round, and if you win it, you send them back to 1400. Like, so it should be pretty much like something that you don't even think about too much, like how you're going to play out that round. But it's a lot of times, you know, teams or players are just used to like getting away with things or maybe winning some rounds when they shouldn't. But at the end of the day, like when it comes to the really best teams in the world, you just need to play in that way where you give yourself the most chances to win.
Exactly. Now, as Dan alluded to a moment ago, we're going to go ahead and wind this podcast down since we have been talking for a little while. But before we do that, Janko, I just wanted to cede the floor to you one more time to just make any comments we never prompted you on, to bring up anything that you never got a chance to talk about, or simply to shout out your org, your fans, anything like that.
Yeah, of course I want to give a shout out to the fans. Like, it's been insane, and all the people supporting us. You know, we had some rough results like in the past 2 months, but people have been really like supportive with their messages and everything, and especially the fans at venues, like they're very passionate. So that's been great to see for the team. As for like things to talk about, really, I don't know, like I'm just having a lot of fun, like with the coaching, like being back competing. There's like a bit more to it that's not CS related, like more than I thought there would be. So that's been like a challenge at times, like just managing, you know, stuff outside the game and realizing how much impact it can have on the game. But for me, it's been great. Like, it's been a learning experience. Of course, I might know a good amount about the game, but still, you know, the coaching and the dynamics of that, like, it's been great spending time with the guys. So when it comes to all of that, I'm just looking forward to keep at it and basically stick with the team and see how good can we actually get over the next couple of months.
Well, and I think I speak for the room when we say we can't wait to see the fruits of those results. And yeah,
absolutely.
Now, Janko, you're home after a long stretch. We know you don't get a lot of time, so we greatly appreciate giving us so much of it. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to speak with the theScore eSports podcast.
No problem. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.
It was a real pleasure on our end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Appreciate it. You too.
Bye. So this is not. I'm sure we're gonna have a really we'll talk about what Janko said and
I have like so much to say. That was a wonderful conversation.
He said that you will send people back to send the other team back to 1400 based on the round. And I know that he meant the economy, but I thought the year, and then I thought how great would it be if you could buy like a sword and a bow and arrow in CS.
It's like, oh, did you buy armor? Oh, you mean like Kevlar? No, like
chainmail. Yeah, do you have
chainmail?
Yeah. I just feel like there's a really great universe in which somebody runs at you he runs out of mid doors holding a claymore.
That would be a terrible place to Claymore play.
Absolutely.
You'd want to play on CAD, I think.
That's like Team Fortress 2, where you
Yeah,
can
exactly.
actually
That's what I'm
equip
thinking.
a claymore and Yeah.
Imagine if
that kind of claymore.
Imagine if like CTs could just roll up to the site with a ballista,
Yeah,
with
I don't.
trebuchet.
Well, let me put it this way: if you buy a ballista, and T's rush that site, you will not make it to site. You will not be able to set up your trebuchet before T's rush B. This is a really weird conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about actual other things.
No, I really want to say, obviously I enjoyed that tremendously. This guy is such a CS:GO mind. I've wanted to talk to him for a really long time. So happy we got to do that. I loved what he said about Astralis. I love what he said about Virtus.pro. It was really interesting to hear him candidly speak about sort of why he made the transition from analyst to coach, because a lot of people we've had on this podcast who are talent, by which I mean casters or hosts or analysts, allude to these kind of things, and just for whatever reason or another, they don't sort of go into it, and it's fine not to name names, which Janko didn't do, but I think he did a very elegant and professional job of stating the reality of the issues that he faced.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you don't want to burn bridges. That's
not
the
at all.
key
Of course,
thing, right?
Of course you don't.
So you still want to get employed, but it sounds like some are doing a better job than others. Not totally surprised by that. We've seen that with tournament organizers in Dota, for example, where we're getting some are doing a better job with events than others. Okay. And it's cool. It's cool that we got a little bit of that inside perspective, because it's just not something you see really on. So you're not going to see that in his Instagram story.
And like I said, the man is obviously a consummate professional. However, he is also, he's got a lot of metaphorical medals on his chest in terms of CS. So I think he'd have to work hard to make himself unhireable. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's true.
He's he's very, very good at. And I truly meant it. I wasn't trying to butter his toast, so to speak, when I said that I think that the analyst desk at large, sort of the floating analyst desk in the sky of CS:GO events, has lost something without him, because I really do think he provided a certain kind of analysis that not everyone does provide.
Absolutely. I will also say that I think part of the refreshing of the candor was him talking about his own team, talking about talking about when Josh asked him about Stewie and Tarek playing about passively, and talking about, hey, listen, this is the approach you have to take on this team. This is what our players are doing. This is what we're working on. Fallen can still be great. Sometimes he doesn't feel that I think that level of candor about his team is something that I feel like we also don't get a lot from a lot of coaches, from a lot of players. Just the ability to just be honest about hey, this is what we're good at, this is what we're not great at, and this is what we're working on for Katowice.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited. Not as far flung as Katowice even, but much sooner to see the improvements that MIBR are surely going to go through in no small part thanks to Janko.
Can we have a new segment on this podcast called Butter His Toast?
Butter His Toast.
Where the guest has to say something nice about someone else. They have to butter his toast.
Ooh, I actually...
butter their toast. Let's be gender neutral. Butter their toast.
Yeah,
they have to butter their toast.
I actually I know you're joking. I actually like this idea.
I was initially joking, but then as I started talking about it, I'm like, this is actually kind of cool, because you could see if you were say something nice about this person, and it's maybe they don't.
Maybe we on the Score eSports podcast set it up with a bit of a difficult situation.
We gave Janko NiKo, and he said plenty of nice things about NiKo, but it's easy to say nice things about NiKo.
True.
It is easy. It is easy.
Very
Just
easy.
look
you would say those things to him on LAN.
You would say those things to him on LAN, and you would also say those things about him in the comment section of our video, The Story of NiKo, which is out now, and you should totally go watch.
Absolutely.
Well, after that awkward silence, I think it's the perfect time to end the podcast so I can shut up. I just want to say thanks for listening, everybody, if you're still with us, and thank you so much to our guest, Janko. It was a pleasure speaking with him, and I really hope we do get the opportunity to do so again in the near future.
Absolutely.
Yep. So
Can't wait.
I also cannot wait. So for Dan and for Josh, I'm Colin saying until next time on the Score eSports podcast, GG.